It's Jermaine here with NWT Astro, and today, or in this video rather, I'm going to be trying to put all the pieces together so this Dobsonian can actually become a go-to. So I'm going to need to start taking this stuff apart. I really have no idea. I am loosely following well, not loosely, pretty much I'm following a project that I saw posted on Thingiverse, but it's more or less just text-based. Like he just says, put this here and there and there, and you put all this stuff together. So I really don't know exactly how this comes all together. I'll probably be doing a lot of time lapse, as you can see, or maybe you can't see, but we got a Chiefs game going, guys. So, you know, I'm gonna be doing a lot of time lapse and just kind of working on this leisurely, but then I'll probably come back with a voiceover to kind of explain what's going on. Or I might pause here and there and kind of explain as I figure out what to do. So with that, guys, I'm gonna go back into some time lapse. So the first thing I needed to do was to take this bolt, this center bolt off, and that would allow the top portion and the bottom portion of the Dobsonian base to separate. So a good number of these pieces actually have a lot to do with alignment, and they're not really structural, but the pieces are important to make sure that you have everything properly aligned and centered. So as we go further into this project, I kind of go off into some of my own things, and I will talk about that. But like this little centering ring that looks like almost like a wheel spoke, that was very important. All right, guys, so this is what I did. I'm a little bit winging it. So here's the factory spacer. So that's in there. And I take the Lazy Susan centering ring that I printed. It goes there. Then the Lazy Susan. So now it's all centered up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mark these holes. For these holes, I'm going to drill all the way through and actually use these nuts and bolts to connect this Lazy Susan to this base.
Welcome into the All-State halftime. Chiefs, a 14-7 lead over the Jaguars. The Brian Fletcher, Dobsonian, Scott Bathhouse here on the field. And Jason, this Chiefs offense, when it looks good, it looks untouchable the way we just mentioned with Coach Reed. What did they have going earlier? I mean, listen, when you pick the regular lift off the ground, it's right down the rhythm. They're attempting to hit the good place on the field.
All right. So guys, I just drilled through those 4 places, put the bolts through. So these are the 4. And so there it is. I'm gonna tighten down all those bolts. Right now they're just finger tight. So let me go ahead and do that off camera. So at this point, I am basically doing my own thing and not really following the instructions that was on Thingiverse. This originally was said to be a no woodworking project, and there is a way to just kind of cinch down the pulley with that center bolt, but it just seemed to move too much for me. It seemed like that was going to introduce a lot of backlash, and you know, that's not all that good. So I decided that I wanted a more secured way, so I kind of made my own way from here on out, and this is just what I came up with. You might come up with something better, or you might want to follow the instructions on Thingiverse explicitly. So it's just kind of whatever you want to do, but just so you know, what I'm doing now is no longer going to really line up with the instructions on Thingiverse. So I actually had I put together quite a bit of this, and I had to disassemble it, and it's been over a month. I can't remember exactly where I went wrong, but I do remember that I needed to join the pulley to the bottom base, not this upper base. And I think that's what I had. I had it screwed into the upper base, and it just wouldn't allow for rotation. I wasn't even really thinking about the whole thing mechanically sound. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a hole saw, and I'm going to cut a circle out of these. You can see those holes, but that's going to allow me to screw all the way through the lower base, and then that pulley and the lower base can basically be one, and the upper base can spin independently of that setup there. So here's a little trick. Since I had the center of this wood already drilled out, it wouldn't allow my center drill bit to go through and to be a guide for the rest of the hole saw. So I actually screwed in this little piece of scrap wood, and then I centered like a small drill bit through it, and then I was able to use the center bit of the hole saw to go through that, and then I just went through the board once I've already had that guide set up. So once I did that, I had a nice clean hole, and the piece that I removed, I actually still used it, but that ended up becoming a part of the base, not this top portion. So I'm drilling holes in the base portion because the circular piece of wood right there that I drilled out, it all is going to have to be bolted together. So I believe I had to run to the store and get some longer bolts that could go through the bottom base and then go up through the top base and all the way through the 3D printed tooth pulley that I made. And it also had to go through that little base plate there. So it had to be they were pretty tall screws that I had to get my hands on. So I'm just trying to kind of dry fit it all back together. And as you can see that the center part that I cut out, and now that it's flush with the bottom base, it's kind of recessed. So now when I put my 3D printed pulley on it, it's not going to set the way it needs to set. So I made some corrections to address that. So I got an idea. I could use this spacer that's part of the 3D printed parts to lift up that part, and then my 3D printed pulley could sit on top of it. And it turned out to not quite be enough, space being provided by that. So what I ended up doing was I took this bottom bracket off. I think that wasn't really all that needed at this point. I had so many bolts and things kind of reinforcing what I had. So I took that part off. So now I'm putting everything back together, pretty much dry fitting it again. It took a whole lot of this back and forth. So as you can see, I got the bottom little bracket that was kind of helping to center things. But now that everything is all centered, I really don't need it anymore. Of course you can build yours differently, but you can see I'm getting all the bolts back in there. I've got all these bolts in there. So now the upper base can move independently from the bottom base while leaving that center tooth pulley, the 3D printed pulley that I got. It's leaving that to be stationary with the bottom base, and then the top base can move independently from it. So this is a pretty pivotal moment for me. As you can see, I got a piece of plywood, and I'm using just a clamp to clamp it to the sides of the base. And I have my motor, bolted to that. And this is the first movement that I've actually got out of this project. So this was pretty good. I felt like I was on my way. So there you go. So when I was taking off the, whatever you call these pieces that really, I guess it was just one side that had to come off so I could put on the toothed pulley. I needed to lay the telescope on its side because I didn't want to be taking its bolts off and then it just falling and hitting the glass, because that would be really, really bad. So yeah, I laid it on its side to prevent that from happening. So I believe this is one of the M10 bolts that's supposed to fit right in there after 3D printing. So I don't know if the 3D model was a little bit, undersized to accept it, or just the nature of me not printing the best way caused it to happen. But yeah, that didn't want to fit. So what I ended up doing was I took that little bolt and I screwed it onto the screw with that handle on it, and I heated up really hot with the heat gun, and then I pressed it in there. And then once it was in there, I took this handle with that bolt on it, I took it around the other side and screwed it in and drew it tightly all the way down. So yeah, that worked out pretty good. It's almost like I did it on purpose. So when it came to this belt, I had to, cut it and kind of glue it together to make the lengths that I needed. And I used a grinder with a flat disc to kind of remove some of that rubber and just get down to that, just the nylon reinforcement strings down in there. I just kind of remove most of that rubber. So then when I glued it to itself, it wasn't way too thick. And the super glue that I used, I forget the exact name, but it had some kind of property that allowed it to be somewhat still flexible and not just break apart. I want to say it wasn't CA glue, but it seems like when I was researching it, it had CA something in it. Whatever is in CA glue, I think it had something to do with that. But you could just research a somewhat flexible super glue. And you get that and you can glue your belts together, and it's been working pretty good for me. I've done a lot of testing and it's still working just fine. So I'm just putting the super glue on, and yeah, probably using some gloves would have helped because I had this stuff stuck on my fingers for like 2 days or something like that. But yeah, I got it on there and just glued it up. Now, it would have helped to measure better so my belt would be tighter initially. Now, I do ended up kind of creating a tensioning situation to put some tension on the belt. And that did work, but I did make a mistake, but I'll show you that when we get there. So I've got the belt all fitted up, and turns out it's just way too loose. So I was thinking about just cutting it and doing it again, but the problem was I would have had to cut out that entire section, or I would have had two, pieces in there that I kind of put together. So I didn't want that. I did have enough belt. I could have did it all over again, but I decided that it's not likely that I would have the belt to be perfect. So I figured I would just put in more or less basically a tensioner pulley. And at first I'm just using like a piece of plastic, one of those plastic spacers just going around a bolt. But I eventually ordered a timing pulley. It's just a idler pulley is really what it was called. And it's toothed as well. And so right here, this is where I messed up. I put this too high. I just kind of arbitrarily just chose a spot, but I didn't realize this was going to prevent my telescope from going all the way to 90 degrees. It would go like 82 degrees or something like that, and it'd get stuck because it was hitting up against this. So later on, I had to go lower and do it all over again. So now I just have a hole in the side. And so, yeah, as you can see right there, I kind of pull the belt back behind that point, and it's nice and tight, and it works. It worked, other than I couldn't go to the zenith with the telescope. So I've got it in there, and I'm using an app. I'm kind of moving the telescope around just a little bit just to kind of test out what I'm doing. So I modeled and printed some very basic 3D prints, kind of mounting plates for these limit switches. And they came out pretty good and allowed me to mount the limit switches exactly where I needed to mount them. So guys, I know this was definitely not a perfect tutorial. Really wasn't a tutorial at all. It's just I did want to document what I did, and hopefully watching me fumbling through this whole project can kind of give you some ideas of maybe what not to do. You know, if you're more handy than me, you probably would avoid a lot of these mistakes that I made. But I did want to show people, if at anything, it'll kind of show like maybe you are in over your head if you see the things that I did and go, you know what, that's not for me. That's all good, but that's what these educational videos are for. So, you know, as you can see, guys, I'm using a little drill battery with an inverter. That's how I'm powering this system. So I thought this is just going to be a 3-part build, but I'm actually going to break it into 4 parts. And the 4th video is going to talk about the calibration and just getting the software set up correctly. So this thing will actually run and not just move around like a robot. It would actually run and track and go to and do everything that I needed to do. Also in part 4, I will give a detailed look at the telescope and all the parts and like how I've got everything mounted and just a close-up part by part to get a really close look at what I got going on. But it's mainly going to be about the software setup. Please like and subscribe if you want to see that stuff. It's coming up soon.